Hi everyone, my name is Joe Olasino and I'm an account executive with CCSI. I wanted to thank everyone for attending today's webinar, Penetration Testing for Compliance webinar. Today our practice manager at CCSI, Matt Pascucci, will be presenting. And for any of those who aren't familiar with CCSI, we have been in business since 1974 and our core competencies are around infrastructure, which incorporates data center, IPT, wireless, disaster recovery. Also security, which we will be discussing today, and our security practice focuses on real-time breach detection, risk assessments, penetration and vulnerability testing, DDoS solutions, secure mail, endpoint protection, and application security testing. Also, our cloud practice, we focus on migration as a service, backup, disaster recovery, and cost containment for those customers that already may be in the cloud and are looking to reduce costs. We also provide, as I mentioned, application monitoring solutions. That's with our visibility as a service. We're a managed service provider, and for the security side, we're an MSSP, a managed security service provider. And we also provide hardware maintenance through our flagship product, CCSI Net. For any questions during the course of the webinar, just please place them in our WebEx chat. And at this point, I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce to you Matt Pascucci from CCSI.
Thanks, Joe. So for this particular WebEx that we're going to be doing here, we're going to speak kind of briefly about the penetration test that we do for our clients. This is one of our largest offerings that we do, primarily because we're in a lot of different industries, heavily regulated. So we do a lot of work in hospitals, we do a lot of work in banks and e-commerce. So these are particular areas that we see quite a bit work come out of it because they're being mandated by compliance to go out and do penetration tests. So we built these out a little bit different than our competitors. We like to be a little bit more open. We like to do things a little bit slower. And throughout the course of this webinar, we'll kind of go over that a little bit and why we do that, why it's beneficial to both the client and to be honest, to us as well. So these are things we're going to start speaking about a little bit, but compliance right now is definitely a driving factor that we're seeing for penetration tests. We do see people and organizations that want to have penetration tests, excuse me, for security. I mean, that's definitely something that we get a lot, but a lot of times the driving factor is compliance, and we like to take that and utilize a secure mindset, but wrap it around more of a compliance framework so we get the best of both worlds. So, reasons that we see pen tests. So we kind of just chatted about that a little bit, but a lot of times we're seeing them is so you can validate your current controls, right? So you have controls in place, you're doing certain things. How are those actually working? Can an adversary go out there and kind of either bypass or mitigate a particular area of your controls? Without being tested, you never know. And that's kind of what a pen test is. A pen test is being able to go out there and proactively determine where your risks are and if you have controls in place to mitigate them. So these are things that we do. We have teams of guys here that are going to be able to go out there and perform a plethora of tests that we'll get into so that we're able to pretty much proactively go out and determine your risk posture based off controls and give you a nice report that's going to have objectives on it so that we can go out and really determine exactly where you're at risk and then put a priority against it. Maybe there's particular controls that are already in place that need to be tightened. Maybe there's additional configs that need to be made, or maybe many times there's additional hardware that needs to be involved or software to limit some of these weaknesses that an organization has. We also see heavily is that people need to essentially check a box. It sounds horrible, but a lot of times you have to be able to go out there and prove to a committee or an auditor or some type of regulatory board that you've had a penetration test against your assets that are within scope of that compliance. So that is what we see a lot, and we see that a lot, but we like to broaden the scope. We don't like to look at it just for compliance. We like to look at it for security. So we put that lens of things on top of it. Another thing that we see, and we're starting to see this quite a bit more, is that for our clients that we're doing pen tests for, they're getting requests from either their vendors or their clients to prove that they've been, pen tested. So as part of our clients' third-party due diligence, we're being requested to have penetration tests done. And we're seeing that quite a bit. We're seeing that probably over the past I would say year and a half, quite a bit more. I think a lot of this has to do with some of the new regulations that have come out, in particular NYDFS, NYSDFS, their 23 NYCRR regulation that has a heavy say on what third parties should be doing and how they should be being reacted to. So we're seeing that quite a bit. We're even seeing clients of ours having clients come back from them saying, hey, who do you guys use? Because it's that whole supply chain is definitely something that we're seeing an uptick within work. And lastly, what we do see quite a bit is after changes to critical infrastructure. So as an example, PCI says if you make a change to critical infrastructure within scope, it should be pen tested, and you should be able to validate that there's no more risks or that you haven't inadvertently opened up a risk. So, we'll see things and, someone puts in a new firewall per se, right? And you put a new firewall in and you're fixing a lot of either issues that you had with your past firewall, but now you've introduced a new change and you fixed the old issues and opened up new issues. So that's why a lot of the regulatory and compliance are saying when you have critical changes to critical infrastructure that you should probably pen test. You don't have to do a full-blown assessment, but just on that one asset. So it's to really see if there's anything that's been introduced since the change. That's what we normally see here for penetration testing, those 4 particular reasons. I'm sure there's others, but those are the 4 guiding ones that we see pretty frequently. So our methodology is a little bit different, not completely different, but it's very security focused with a very heavy compliance experience. So we don't just want to go in there and saying, okay, you're PCI or HIPAA, or you have to follow NYDFS particular frameworks. We will use those frameworks. We will take everything that we need to out of them, but we're at the end of the day going to try and have as much security focused work in there. So yes, we can go out there and say we're only going to pen test you on your PCI scope. But what we like to do is broaden the scope a little bit more and give you 2 separate reports. That's the way that we're seeing a lot of companies work these days is they want to get tested for PCI. So we do a PCI quote-unquote pen test, which focuses just on their PCI assets. But we take the scope and we broaden it. And we don't usually charge all that much more because a lot of the work and a lot of the head work that we're doing allows us to kind of broaden that scope a little bit more. So as we're out there and building out our infrastructure to our attack infrastructure, and we're building out our reconnaissance, and we're doing these things, like that work has to be done already. So what we like to do is just kind of garner all that in there, do all the work we can, and then open the scope up a little bit more. And that allows us to then give you 2 particular reports. One that's going to focus on your PCI or your compliance-driven scope, and then the rest is going to be for the entire other organization. We do that because we don't want to act like a chop shop here. We're not going to go out there and quote you by IP address or anything like that. That just doesn't work because attackers and adversaries, they don't say, oh, we can't attack that one because it's off the list of the scope. They're going to go after everything they can. And if there is a particular area that's vulnerable in your regular network that can then pop over into your PCI or your HIPAA or any other area, that's vulnerable. So we want to be able to broaden the scope as much as we can at a reduced cost, if any, so we can go out there and really get a better understanding of what you guys have there. So separation of duties is another thing that we see here. So we do a lot of SOC monitoring for our clients, and many times we see this both ways. We see a lot of the financials saying, well, if you're doing our monitoring, we want somebody else to do our pen test. So for the big financials, we'll end up getting clients who are, who we're not doing SOC monitoring for because they need to have separation of duties, and they want a third party to come out there and pretty much test their SOC. For some of the mid-sized companies, that's not as much of a concern. So we're able to kind of entangle the 2 of those by being able to go out there and saying, we're not going to tell our SOC side of things that we're doing a pen test. We have that firewall, that quote-unquote logical firewall in between our business units here that we're not going to let anything go. We're going to actively test our procedures, and we're going to do that there. So we can do both things from either side. The rules of engagement are much different. So what we like to do is we like to really determine what you want tested. So we're not going to just say, hey, we're going there, we're going to try to get domain admin because if we get that, then we win. There's certain systems that are off net. There are certain systems that don't have, complete domain access. So we really want our clients to really guide exactly what their critical crown jewels are. So if it's a law firm, like, can we get to the DMS? If it's PCI, where are the credit card and tokenization servers at? If it's HIPAA, where are the EMS? Where are the EHR? What can we do? So we want to be able to go out and really understand what your critical assets are, and maybe even not. That's kind of where we want to start. But there might be particular areas that you are just very concerned about. So first, what we like to do is just determine the rules of engagement. Like, what does our client want to get out of this? What do they want to either show their board, show their management, test controls? What is critical to them? And then we guide our assessments towards that. So we're not just going to go in there and just kind of wreak havoc. It's going to be a very controlled manner. We're going to be going as best we can towards your objectives. And that really becomes a conversation that we're having throughout the assessment and well before it, so that we have a better understanding of what you're expecting from us going forward. Another thing is, we don't like to do these things in a rush. So, and we'll kind of touch on that a little bit in a few minutes, but we don't want to rush this. Attackers are not rushing. If you get someone in your network and they're just kind of tripping over everything and they're setting off every alarm, you're lucky, right? So that doesn't normally happen right away. No one's doing this loud anymore. They're taking their time. They're going low and slow. And we like to do that too. We like to mimic the adversaries, their approach and how they do things. We actually take per industry, we'll take particular APT groups and then model how they've done things in that industry, and then use particular tools that they've used, and really mimic what the bad guys are doing based off the industry. And no one's going in there loud anymore. Everyone's getting in there, they're kind of living off the land using tools that are on systems, and these are things that we want to continue to follow, because what's the point of doing a pen test if we're not going to actually do it while we're being comparable to what you would actually see in your industry and from an attacker. So we are, as we'll see through the slides coming, we take a little bit longer time to do it. We're not rushing. As I said before, much more open scope, and we can do anything from that scope, from cloud to Wi-Fi to application to mobile to network. So we're full functional on all different domains. Everybody that we use here is local. So we do a lot within the New York metro area. It doesn't mean that we don't have to be here, but that's a lot of our current employee base. So we're all local here. We can travel if needed, but that's kind of one of the offerings that we offer here. So we try to keep as much T&E down as possible. And the frequency and scheduling of tests. So we'll work with you. We have multiple clients. We have clients that are essentially at this point doing dozens of tests with us per year. And then we have clients that are doing 5. Then we have ones that are just getting their annuals done. So we will be very open to doing long-term engagements at a reduced rate, especially if there's going to be a lot more tests involved. So these are things that we work with our clients for. The types of engagements, like I just said, we do a lot of networking ones. So internal, we'll drop a box in there. We can send something to you, or we'll literally sit in a cube or an office for you. That's something we can do. External, we do everything remotely here. You'll have our IP ranges if it's external, if you like to monitor them to make sure that it's really us. Web application and mobile, these are things that we are seeing a huge uptick in right now. It seems that there is quite a bit going on right now within the application side of things, especially on the mobile side. So we're very, very functional on those areas, and we're seeing quite a bit there, especially from an SDLC standpoint, where people are really just getting a better understanding of where are their vulnerabilities, and then testing it dynamically and statically, and then having a pen test afterwards. So these are things that are very, very high on our list to help out our clients. Social engineering, that's part of it as well, so we do a lot of that. We'll get into quite a bit of what we do there on a future slide. Cloud assessments, so Amazon came out recently and said you no longer need to let them know that you're doing a pen test, so that makes our world a lot easier, because there was always a lot of scoping and issues and scheduling to validate with Amazon. So working with Amazon, working with Azure and GCP, we've done quite a bit of work with them. Pen testing clients who have workloads in the cloud there. Reconnaissance, this is going to be on a future slide. We're going to do quite a bit of that before we even put our packets on your network. We're going to come in there with a full recon. So that's something that is part of the engagement. Something that is optional, the last two here are optional. So we do a lot of physical breaches. So if attackers can't get into your network, they're going to try to do things physically. They're going to try to break in. They're going to try to see if they can lockpick. They're going to see if they can get around card readers and just get into an office and either, garner information about that organization, or try to drop something on the network, or try to steal, a workstation or something. And these are areas of compromise that a lot of people don't really think about currently. They always think, okay, we have security, we have a front desk, but there's a lot of work that still has to be done there. And this is part of the engagement that we'd like to do if we're going to be there on site anyway. So, if we're doing an internal there, we like to at least see if we can break in, see if we can physically break in and then do the internal, and let you know what we've seen from a reconnaissance standpoint. If we're doing the internal, we usually try to put that in there at no cost. So we're trying to give a lot more of our clients a lot more bang for their buck. And then there's red teaming. So red teaming is when we're actively working with someone in the network. It's very goal-based. It's testing particular areas. So it's a little more advanced than a typical penetration test. You're really testing objectives there. So how quickly can your security team go out there and determine where we dropped quote-unquote malware? When did you see it egress out? When did you see certain things? And work with them on these particular scenarios. So timeframes and schedules. So as I said before, we'd like to take a little bit longer time here. We don't have to. If you said, hey, this has to be done in a week, we will do it in a week. But the cost doesn't change for us. For our typical, I would say we typically do things in about 3 weeks. But if we could and we had our way, we would put it out to about 4 to 5. That's just kind of how we like to do things. And it's not a resource thing, so I don't think, we don't have the time to do it. We like to make sure that we have a foothold in, and that we're testing you as an adversary is. So the first week alone is going to be reconnaissance, threat modeling, and building out our own attack infrastructure. We will have a complete OSINT dossier on the company, the people that work there, threat modeling against the technology that you guys have out there, determining these type of things through open source intelligence. And then we go out and we build our attack infrastructure in the cloud. Every attack infrastructure is new per client engagement, so we don't want to be using any dirty IPs. So after we're done with an engagement, we literally, burn down the systems and start fresh with the next one with all new IPs and all new systems. It keeps the integrity of the data there as well. And that's the first week alone. Second week is we start poking around externally if we're going to go full all in, and we get a better understanding of what's out there, how based off of reconnaissance, where is the scope? And when we ask for scope, a lot of times people come to us being like, how much do you charge by IP? We don't do that. We like to, if you're coming to us as client A, we like to give you the scope. So one of the things is we like to at least do recon quickly, and we would like to determine the scope for you. So we would like to try to hand you back your own IPs before we ask for them. So it allows us to get a better understanding. And a lot of times we see clients who forgot they had particular ranges, or they had other companies that were associated with them. So that's really where the recon comes in. So the social engineering also comes in as well, which is kind of a little bit tied in between, if we were doing a physical on-site, trying to speak with people, literally, if we could. And a lot of this is, we spoke with someone this morning who we were doing this with, and they didn't want us to do that, so we take it off the engagement. This doesn't mean you have to do it. But social engineering, either we could do things through, phone, call, social networking is a very, very big one. And just trying to get a better insight of who, what, when, and particularly what you guys have out there. So after you talk to someone, calling up a help desk, calling up random people, you start getting an understanding of how things work. And we tie that as well as our recon that we've done from open source, and we start taking that, and now we're going to start our external attack campaign. So now we have everything, we know people, we've spoke with them, we have an understanding of pretty much your organization, and we're going to start doing vulnerability scans out there. We're going to start poking at exploits, seeing if we can pivot and get in external to internal. If that doesn't work, then we do what we call the assume breach. So after amount, anybody given a certain amount of time is going to eventually probably poke into a network. It takes time and money. So we do something called the assume breach. So we're on your network. You give us a port, or you give us a box or something that's on your LAN, and then we act as, within the user space, act as if a user is sitting there compromised by a phishing email or something like that, and what would happen and how far can we pivot around. And then afterwards, our final attack campaign is kind of wrapping these all together and then delivering you a report within 2 to 5 days. So that's how we like to do it, and that is normally not the case. I would say it's usually a 3-week engagement that we normally do, because the first recon is, we're not even putting packet on your network. The second one is normally internal, and then the third one's first one is an external, and next one's an internal. But we can go as long as you'd like. So we want to make sure that we're giving you the best bang for your buck, and that we're not out there just making a lot of noise. And it's like, hey, everybody saw us. So we're making sure that we're doing this as an adversary would. So from the Recon perspective, everything starts there. Everything starts with Recon. Before we put an actual packet on your network, we will understand who you are, what you do. We're scraping social media. We're on the dark web. We're looking for just people that work there. And that's a big thing. If you can look for people that work there and you can get a better understanding of them, a lot of times they're going to accidentally leak things. And we're going to try to take that and we're going to try to use that for our own advantage. You can look at websites, you can look at code repositories, but all this stuff is then very, very useful later on for when we start doing phishing. We start doing our social engineering part of it. But a lot of this is also using open source tools that have already scanned the internet, and we're looking at it, and we're not even touching it. We're just looking at results that have already happened, pulling in DNS information, getting a better understanding of what domains you might already own and what ways we can go out there and spoof certain things and make things look similar, understanding what type of potential spam filters you might have in place. And so it's really getting out there and preparing for the attack. So we're building out our intelligence there. But after that first week, we're going to know about the organization. We're going to know, hopefully, quite a bit about what your network looks like and some of the systems you have in place. We're going to hopefully know a lot. I say hopefully because it's not always the case. You get a lot more, some you get a lot less, but you normally always get something. Operational business use cases, and this is one of those things where if you look hard enough and you look in the places that you should be looking for OSINT, you will learn about mergers and acquisitions. You'll learn about takeovers or new services that were just launched, or just anything about the company that you can use for your leverage, that we can use for our leverage, for potential social engineering material. So that's the big one. We do a lot of recon on here because we're not just going to go in there, start an engagement, and just run. We're going to really learn about the organization first, because we want to act as if we're an adversary. And that social engineering is usually the top method that we see attackers breaching into networks. They rely heavily on the trust of the employees on there. So if we can have a lot of recon that we've done, and we learn a lot of things about the people and how they work together and business use cases, and then use that as leverage. And if we can find any pain points anywhere within a company that's kind of causing issues or causing any type of stress, we like to use that because hackers rely on human emotion, and that's one of the ways that you get someone to do something that they might not have done in the past. As an example, if there's a company who there's a lot of talk about layoffs that are occurring, and you see that in the news, and we see that on some social media sites. That might be something that we call up and talk about. That it's not fun, it's not nice, but it's something that it's an example of a way that we would be able to get information from people. We do this quite a bit. We build out our attack infrastructure. Like I said, every client engagement for the phishing and social engineering, they're getting email servers and web servers that we've built ourselves that are here just for this engagement in the cloud, and they're essentially burnt afterwards. They're in the cloud, they're turned down, they're deleted, they're never used again, and we pull up new ones for everyone else. We'll utilize fake accounts in social media. We'll call up as other people. You can quickly build a relationship with people, and that's how trust is built. And once you have trust, you can get a little bit further in with social engineering. So how quickly can you build trust over the internet these days is actually kind of astounding. So doing that and utilizing phone calls and spoofing, and especially spear phishing. Spear phishing is brutal. We do a lot of training for executive admins, because they're the ones who are getting spear phished essentially because a lot of times they're looking at the executive's email and they're clicking on things that maybe they shouldn't have. So we do a lot of training in that area. But we'll be sending over weaponized docs if we're allowed to, our malicious links on the web servers that we built and forms, etc. So we're doing exactly what the attackers are doing, except we're not going to utilize the data that we get from it. And we said before, physical assessments with breaking and entering. So that's something that is not normally seen in a lot of these engagements. There are some people doing it. We like to utilize it heavily if we can, especially if there's an internal part of it. As I said, if we're going to be there on site anyway, let's see if we can get in ourselves and let you know what you say. And if it's an internal, that's at no cost because it's fun. External phase. So the next phase we like to do is we want to go out there, we want to discover what in the heck you guys have out there and how large is your threat landscape. This is based off IPs, but many times, when we do a lot of OSINT and stuff, we'll find stuff that, you have marketing websites at a different, hosted address, or you have mergers and acquisitions, or you have vendors who are doing certain things, and you might want to just speak with them and make them as part of the engagement if, you're legally able to. But these are things we'll do. From an external perspective, we'll do application testing, we'll do network pen testing, and if allowed to, and it's not normal, we'll do DDoS. We've done that multiple times. And that's normally a question we get from within setting up the SOWs is, please don't DDoS us. That's only there if you want it. So that is the e-commerce companies that are very concerned on how to do proactive tests. So that is normally not included, but it is available. The scope that we have here, we like to bring in as many people as possible. We have clients who allow and bring in other clients as part of the engagement because they know they're part of their supply chain. So that's something, if allowed, we would love to do that. I know there's a little more coordination there, but we'll do external discovery with vulnerability scans, attempt to compromise afterwards, and we're just trying to find every possible external way in, and that can include essentially breaking and entering, down to port scans to determine where you're open, to doing weaponized docs through email. One of the fun ones is to test that is to go out there and determine who actually, what if the client has open job recs. We're sending now weaponized documents into HR with resumes that look very good. So as they open up the resume, they're going to launch something on their workstation. So pretty much attempting to act as if we were really going after them. So we will go as far as you would allow us to go on a lot of these engagements here. The internal one is, like we said, the assumed breach. As if we were not able to get in externally from that week time frame, given enough time and money, everybody is eventually going to have something poke in. So we have that assumed breach. We're sitting on your LAN. We're going and laterally moving and pivoting through your network as best we can. We'll work with your internal team to validate those particular controls and defenses. So it's not like you're not going to see us there. We want to be able to be with you guys. We have no problem if you want to have an analyst literally just kind of sit with us during the time, as long as no one's interfering and trying to hack back, which we would advise against. We have no problem working with anybody. It's actually, this is a learning experience for people. It's an awareness, so the more the merrier. We like to do even daily touch bases on what we've seen, how far we've got, and kind of go from there. So we don't particularly like to let the entire company know, but there is definitely people that should be aware, especially sometimes some of the analysts. But then at the same time, you also want to see how they're going to work with that internal part of it. So during the initial assessment, we like to determine what your critical assets are so that we know how far to go with certain things. So you might say, hey, there are particular systems here. We know they're vulnerable. We know they're at risk. Be very gentle, around this particular subnet or IP or range, or even do not touch those systems. And that will adhere to that. If you know that they're going to fall over, there's going to be an issue if we're to touch them, that alone, proves that you have to go out there and fix them. And that's just kind of something that we need to do, but we don't have to prove it to you by actually bringing you down. So we're very, very gentle on those type of areas. And reporting, so this is it, right? At the end of the day, you need the reporting. You need to be able to say, what am I getting? So we determine findings based off your risk appetite. So we like to do high, medium, low, but then we adjust it a little bit. So we'll do, particular like risk levels based off framework. So yes, you might have found findings that were high, medium, low, but the remediation is a little bit easier in a particular one area of that. So we give like a thermometer of where you might be based off particular sections of compliance. So it's not just looking like you're all bad or you're all good. So we like to really just kind of cut that down a little bit. So heavily works towards OWASP Top 10 and other frameworks that we have there. We do a lot with compliance. We know a lot of compliance from the application standpoint is kind of looks at OWASP as the de facto on a lot of things. So we utilize that heavily for our clients as well. And we'll give out attestation. So instead of going out there and throwing out your whole pen test towards like a client or a vendor who says, have you been pen tested? We will have attestation reports saying, this is how we did it. Here's a methodology. On this date we did this, and sign off on it so that they can prove that they were pen tested but don't have to give the results. And we always draft them. We go back and forth multiple times. We might have a finding that we consider high and crazy, but then the client comes down and says, well, you know what, that thing's pretty much going offline tomorrow, and there's no data on it, and it's completely segmented from the network. So we'll adjust things as needed based off context from the client, and then the final reports kind of send out to you. So that is kind of how we do things. I didn't want to go too crazy in depth and bore you guys, but penetration testing is probably right now one of our largest services that we offer based off the compliance needs and requirements. So that is somewhat what we do. Feel free to reach out to Mr. Alessino here if you have any other questions or want to talk a little bit more about exactly what we do in a little more in depth. We can send out sample reports. We can, chat a little bit about the industries that we work with and how that kind of affects you. But definitely something that we're happy to speak about.
Thank you, Matt. I saw we had a couple of questions, Matt, come in during the webinar. Would you be able to
Yep. Hold on, let me just take a look.
respond to some of them?
Yep. All right. So we have these that came in through here. What happens if there are issues or outages during the test? So, we can never 100% tell you that there will never be an issue. That is just kind of all in honesty there. Like there'll be issues potentially with lockouts, and that's the one big one that we see a lot. There's someone, we're trying to do credential stuffing externally, and suddenly someone gets locked out of their account. We will always have a project manager, and we'll always have a point person on our side, and we like to dedicate similar people on the client side, so there's a back and forth communication that can be escalated very quickly. So if you do think something weird is happening and that we're actually causing it for whatever reason, we're on it, we're there. So there is definitely that communication, and we want that communication to be open. And we could even to the point of set up a Slack channel if you really wanted to and sit everybody in there so that we're always there, because we also have questions, right? So if we can go back and forth with those questions, it makes things a little bit easier. Here's another one. Is there ever a reason to bring in law enforcement during or after an exam? That is really up to you guys. So there are particular areas. We're never going to call law enforcement. We're going to advise you particular times to do that. Like if we were to go out there and find something on your network where it was being used for either terrorism or child pornography or whatever like that, you need to contact law enforcement for that, and we will work with you to do that with you and on your behalf. So these are areas that we would do it. We're never going to call up someone and say, hey, these guys are vulnerable, you should really fix them. That's why we're doing the test for you, right? So so that we would work with you if there was ever something that was found illegal on your organization's premise. But we're not going to be sitting out there being whistleblowers or anything like that. So we'll work with you on finding the right contacts. We have contacts all over in law enforcement. So if that was ever a case, we could work with you guys directly. How quickly can you turn around a report? So the reports are normally turned around within a week. We say 5 days. We normally, honestly, turn them around in about 2 days, but we like to give ourselves a week because sometimes we're doing multiple engagements. Like this month, we're doing about 10 pen tests this month alone. So we like to give ourselves a week to do that. but we normally turn them around in 2 days or so, about 48 hours, because most of the time, we're there, we're taking our notes, and we're filling in the report as we're doing it, because we want everything as fresh and screenshots and all that kind of stuff. What certifications do your testers have? So we have a lot of our testers. We have certain testers that are heavily certified in SANS and OSCP and CEH and all the ones that are there. And then we have testers who have 0 certifications. They've just been doing this for 30 years. So if there is a need as part of an RFP or something like that to show certifications, we can definitely prove that. If there's times where we might have someone saying we're doing a heavy Microsoft environment, so bring in people who are heavily certified in Microsoft. We can look for that, or even vice versa with Linux. So we can work with some of the requirements you have, but I would say most of our guys and gals that we work with here, they are heavily tested, heavily certified, but even more at the same point, they bring in that real world battle experience from decades of, I would say essentially at least 10 to 12 years of experience in the field. But yeah, so that is all the questions we have.
Well, thank you, Matt.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. And in closing, I'd like to thank you all for attending today. Your account managers and myself will be following up to discuss next steps. And also, please keep a lookout for future CCSI additional webinars that we'll be offering. Thank you, and have a great day.